Hey, this is ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co. Today we're going to review Eternals. So this is directed by Chloe Zhao. Time is 2 hours 37 minutes, so a lot longer than I like. I usually like hour and a half, but I think for Marvel movies you can go to 2, so 37 minutes. I'm thinking, can they cut any of the time out of this film? Actors are Genna as Sersi, Richard Madden plays Ikaris, Angelina Jolie plays Thena, Salma Hayek plays Ajak, Kit Harington plays Dane, Whitman, and there's several other characters. So basically the story is the Eternals are sent to Earth, and they're there to protect the Earth from these deviants that arrive, and the deviants kind of are hellbent on destroying the Earth, so they're there just to protect against the deviants and let the humans kind of develop as they're going to develop. So that's fine, but it's past like 7,000 years. They got there 5,000 BC. All of a sudden humanity's really big, and then there's this emergence involved, and then it's kind of a complete change of what actually they were there for. So it's kind of a betrayal to the original idea, and they find out a lot of different things about themselves being the Eternals versus the regular humanity, and their actual leader Ikaris. So they're just like, whoa, what's this, And so it has kind of this big showdown at the end of the film, which is really nice. I really like the idea of combining Greek myth with more modern day combinations. So it's kind of an interesting concept of using Greek mythology mixed in with today's world, and then later with other mythologies with costumes and designs and sets and symbolism. So that's a really cool concept, I think. So they do have kind of a little bit of a marketing gimmick in the sense like every character is from a different race, There's a black guy, there's a white guy, there's a white girl, there's an Indian girl, there's an Indian guy, there's an Indian grandpa, they throw in an Indian dance kind of Bollywood style for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or something. And they have like a Chinese actor, they have a fat actor, and you're like, have a child actor, you're like, oh my god, this is just so much. Like, why would some godlike creature create a kid actor or kid character as one of the god creators? That doesn't make any sense. Or why would he create one of his soldiers to be this fat guy? It's like, that doesn't make any sense either, except that you're trying to appeal to a fat audience, obviously. So a little bit gimmicky on the marketing there. It's fine to use different ethnicities. I mean, that's kind of a cool thing, I think. But then, like, fat isn't an ethnicity, I don't think. But anyway, one of the characters is deaf too, which is cool, I think. But then why would a godlike creature create deaf characters? That doesn't make any sense either. So again, kind of a marketing ploy to appeal to deaf characters, which, it's fine. It's the audience. I have a friend who's deaf, but it just doesn't make any sense as far as the god creature. We probably create perfect type of creatures to kind of attack, which, like half the characters are, and then half are kind of out of shape or something. And you're like, well, what? This doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of a marketing gimmick, I would say, just to kind of pull the audience in, which, they got to cover their costs because it is a Marvel movie and they spent a lot of money on the CGI. So I guess you have some of that. Really interesting twists and turns with betrayals of characters at the end, so that's a really cool aspect, I thought. As well as there's this creation of one of the deviants keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're like, oh, is he going to have a showdown at the end, or is he going to be an ally at the end? Especially once you find out the secret nature to the Eternals, which is way different than they were originally told, that they were there to protect the Earth. One thing I think they didn't do exactly well is they didn't show the immortal age of the characters. I mean, they show them in Babylon and they flash forward to today, and then they show them in Babylon and they flash forward to today. But it's like kind of like a time traveler feel. It doesn't have a feel that they actually lived through the centuries. So I think what you could have done is done a quick time lapse for some of the characters. They could flash back and be like, hey, remember when we were in Rome, and remember when we were in this medieval thing, and just show a quick scenario stitched together, like quick montage version of one of the characters kind of flashbacking through that scenes. You would have much more of an impact that they actually lived those scenes. Especially, you could have done that for 2 or 3 characters, and I think that would have had that sense of they actually lived eternally. You just really have the sense that they're time travelers, really, like the same feeling a time traveler would have if they flash back to Babylonia and they came today, and they were knowledgeable about Babylonia, so they didn't get in trouble when they went back. So that's kind of the same feel. I think another movie that did this really well was Interview for a Vampire. You really get the sense that Lestrade lives in the past and has had this really long life, and especially his kid, who he converts to a vampire when she's a kid, and then she's pissed at him because she always has to go kill other kids and she can never grow up. And so they do convey that a little bit, because one of the kid characters, he's one of the Eternals. But then you're like, why would this godlike creature that created him make a child version of it that just doesn't serve any purpose except to get the marketing audience, right? So it's kind of like, maybe it was designed that way in the comics. I don't know. I thought it was really interesting. The layering of multiple stories kind of brought together, which I thought they did really nicely. It's a dense layering to the story, even though it's 2.5 hours, but it's, you know, you feel those kind of different layers of the characters, and the different layers of the story is really nice. I don't know if all the story elements were necessary. I felt like they might have been able to shave 10-15 minutes off the film and get it down to 2 hours 15, 2 hours 5 maybe. I mean, I don't know if all the scenes were necessary, but maybe they were for a timing standpoint. I don't know, to develop kind of that suspense between action sequences. But, you know, I felt like it was a little long, like especially same thing with Dune. The last movie I saw was 2.5 hours, and it's like a 3-part movie, and it's like, why didn't you just shorten this to like 2 hours, an hour and a half, and just tell part 1, part 2 is another an hour and a half? But to make it 2.5 hours, you're just like, dude, that's crazy, because it's just one part of the first part of the film. It's gonna be like a 6-hour film or some craziness, which is fine when they go to this TV, right? Because the TV, you don't care, you can just stop, go to sleep, come back, turn it back on, sleep, go back, or you can binge watch it, right? So it doesn't matter, you can do it either way. But you're in the cinema, you got to kind of cut it, you know, kind of those sweet spots. I think an hour and a half is right, or maybe 2 hours tops. So when you go over that, you're like, is it really justified? Complexity of the story, I think it works, but I get a feel there's a little bit of fat they could have trimmed off some of the scenes. Obviously, great visuals, CGI, and this type of story wasn't even really possible until maybe the 2000s. So, you know, a lot of these great ideas that came out of comic books, you know, DC, also Marvel world. Marvel's been especially good at executing, I think, probably due to Stan Lee just kind of planned it all out, and then they kind of took the reins from there, and they kind of had a good recipe book to follow, so to say. And they just got really good at strategically planning those movies, and DC's kind of been all over the map. They try to replicate Marvel's success, and they have some great stories. It's just they're kind of releasing the stories completely haphazard, and they don't develop on one another. So you're like, why are we doing Venom 1, 2, and then does it lead to Spider-Man? And you're like, no, there's no Spider-Man, and it was one of the enemies of Spider-Man. So you're like, they're just kind of like all over the place with Venom. At least that's my impression. You know, it's fine to do tangent movies, I think, with Venom, but then it should eventually pull back into Spider-Man somehow. I don't get the feeling they're going to do that at all. But yeah, it's really cool to see all these great tales from comic books brought to life. It makes me wish every time I see these, like, man, I should have bought more comic books when I was younger and read more. I read some of them, but I wasn't into everything. I was more into Batman, and I don't know, there's a couple comic books I read, but I didn't really collect them too much, I don't think. It's interesting, the concept of the god kind of controlling the creation of the universe versus if you think your traditional scientific explanation of the Big Bang Theory and all that. Or if you go to another theory, which is kind of the traditional Judeo or even Muslim belief, which is like there's a God in the sky and he created the earth in 7 days, in that kind of traditional sense that God controls everything. Or you go to other religions where it's like multiple gods. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of pulling the Greek gods and making them kind of godlike creatures, but in a modern day sense. So that's kind of an interesting play, I thought. There is a few characters that die off in the movie, which is really good, I think. It gives way more punch to the movies. You have some of these superhero movies, no one dies. You're just like, oh my God, it's so dumb, right? And obviously at the very end of the film, they have a chunk of the film at the very end after the credits, so that's kind of cool. So you don't see too many credits at the beginning of the film, which is nice. So they set it up for a sequel, basically. So, you know, they're probably obviously going to shoot a sequel, which makes sense. They're probably going to, it's almost a guaranteed success for this one. So I'm almost certain they would have greenlit the project right off the bat. Anyway, I think it's a pretty good film. I would get it. It might be worth collecting. I'm not sure. It depends if you're a really diehard comic book fan, I think. If you'd like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.